What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest truly understands and appreciates the culinary world. She has over 25 years experience in the industry. She is the host of the wildly successful All in the Industry podcast. She's the founder and president at Bayer Public Relations. Ladies and gentlemen, Shari Bayer. Welcome, Shari.
Thank you for having me. What an intro.
Well, it is an intro, but that's all you. And there was so much more to choose from that it was, we had to cut it down so that I'm not spending the whole time introducing all of your accolades.
Yeah, I know. It could have just gone on for like a couple hours there, but
yeah.
But thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here and to chat with you.
Yeah. And I'm so excited. Like, I love these opportunities where I get to interview the interviewer.
Yes. And I'm hoping we can turn the tables in the future too, so I can interview you.
Oh, I would welcome that very much. I'm always nervous about that. It's unusual, but I think I should just enter that fear and put myself out there.
Yeah, well, I'm more used to being the interviewer, so, but I'm going to let you lead the show.
Wonderful. So I think what's really interesting about your career over the past 25 years, and mostly from the restaurant space, correct?
Yes, and it's even, it's plus the 25, because I got my first job in a restaurant as soon as I could drive at the age of 16. So, but yes, we can go with 25.
Wonderful. So, well, the plus, so the journey is amazing. And then, so while this podcast, the audience has started mostly as hotel people, it's really grown to other entrepreneurs and then into restaurant, F&B and everything. And it's like, it's interesting to see how the audience grows and what's resonating with listeners, to then basically kind of get out of that initial focus and kind of just see, because I think all things, all industries, all jobs, all people touch upon hospitality in some way or the other. It's the most transferable of all of the kind of soft skills that we can all have. Wouldn't you agree?
I would 100% agree, because I was thinking about it where, with this question of what is hospitality, and for me, most of my experience and reference points and where hospitality is in restaurants. And then I would say, bars and hotels, but hospitality, it's everywhere. It's when you walk into a store, it's when you get on an airplane. It's like, it's certainly, hospitality is all in all industries.
It absolutely is. And I think one of the, started off in baking. And when I think about hospitality, to me, I also had a friend of mine on who, she has this really successful cookie company, because I love the smell of cookies and baking. And I think what draws me to that is this idea of this warmth and hearth. And I think of your really extensive and super impressive client list of all the people that you've worked with. I was super drawn to Sullivan Street Bakery.
Oh, wow. And thank you for saying that.
And I'll tell you why.
Kind.
I wouldn't say I'm a bread connoisseur. Although my pandemic pants might say that I am, because everything's getting a little bit tighter. But it's amazing. There's something about that Sullivan Street Bakery that when I'm at any restaurant, I know exactly that it's from those ovens and from those hands. And it's just so soothing. I've never been there as it's baking, but I was wondering if you could just walk us through like your experience with Sullivan Street Bakery and just the feeling of that bread and why it's so recognizable, because to me, it makes me super comfortable and it's immediately recognizable.
Yeah, well, it's Jim Leahy. it's his company, or James Leahy, but he normally goes by Jim. And I met him through the industry at some point, and was lucky to be brought on board to work with him, primarily on the reopening of his now flagship location in Hell's Kitchen, where he does make the bread. And he redid the cafe, and so it was like a relaunch. And he did some work in the back of the bakery too. And a lot of times I work with restaurants when they're opening or reopening, or the new buzz. So I was fortunate to be brought on board, and we did an opening party, and got a lot of great press on it. I mean, Jim's one of these guys, almost it's as a PR person at this point, you're more managing it. Like people know him, and he's known for the no knead bread, which is it got his big break, I guess you'd say, when Mark Bittman wrote about it in the New York Times, and it became discovered. So, I mean, his bread is unique, and yeah, it is distinct. He has a lot of different, it's not just one bread, there's just so many different styles, but it's recognizable. And I think working with him as someone who really is so passionate about what they do, for me as a PR person, it's easy to spread that passion and get people excited about it. And of course, eat his bread. And but I think a lot of it also has to do that he's so hands-on, and where he's making the bread is literally where you're getting it.
Totally.
So
I love how you said that it makes your job easier because he's so passionate about what he's doing. And I'm sure you have a lot of other clients like that as well. But I think, I feel like oftentimes it's so hard, like we're all passionate about so many things, but to really live in that passion and to be able to tell that story and really get into the why we do what we do is often very hard. And oftentimes I find with friends, clients, other entrepreneurs, they know that they're passionate about something, but they have a really hard time describing their why. It's almost like, and I've said this before, it's like we all live in these jars, right? And we can't necessarily see the label on them, right? So we're living in it, we're passionate, we have all those feelings, but sometimes we can't like look in the mirror and see exactly what's there. So with you as doing PR for all these, this amazing list of clients, like how do you help your clients who maybe have a hard time reading their own label and really getting out and telling their story?
It's a good question. I mean, it is about their story, and that also, I mean, for me as a PR person, that kind of became a publicist by accident. I did not study it. I just kind of fell into it when I discovered that you could work with restaurants and chefs and clients and help promote them for what they're doing. And you didn't necessarily have to be the one with the restaurant or the bar. But I only take on clients that I truly believe in, that I feel, quality product, something that I can stand behind myself, because I can't tell someone something's great if I genuinely don't believe it is. So that's, where I start with that. But what's, I've been doing PR for a long time. I started my company in 2003, but what keeps it fresh and exciting for me is that every restaurant and client is different with what their story is and what's unique about them. Even though, having worked with lots of restaurants and openings, there's, I guess, a little bit of a formula that with PR, with spreading the word or putting together press materials and reaching out to the media, but everyone's story is unique. So I think as a PR person, it's talking to them, experiencing what they're about, trying their food, their concept, and understanding it. And then my job, I'm the middleman between them and the media. But it's really a matter of understanding what's unique about them. For Jim, yes, he's the bread and the hospitality and his passion. But some people might, it might be a family business. It's been around a long time, or it might be just, I mean, it could be anything. But I love that keeps it exciting and fresh for me, that everyone's story is unique.
And then, so sometimes people, I've seen this a lot of times, mostly with entrepreneurs, they are doing what they're doing because they found this passion. They don't necessarily know exactly why, but they're just going and going and going. And sometimes they have a hard time telling the story. Because it's hard for me also, I'm sure for a lot of people, it's hard to talk about ourselves, right? Going back to interviewing the interviewer. What's your process on, like, how do you actually get people comfortable to be vulnerable with you, to tell the story, so that it makes your job easier, so that you can really help get their message clear and then also out to the world at large?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, it's true what you said. It's much easier to promote or talk about someone else and uh, give them the recognition or shout outs and for them versus for yourself. I find that even, with myself, like it's harder for me to, let's say, promote my own podcast versus if I could promote someone else's podcast, because, you want someone else to toot your horn a little bit. But I think people who reach out to publicists like realize that we can be that voice and take it off their plate and tell their story. I mean, most people, there's a reason they're opening this restaurant or business, and usually they are passionate about it, or else they wouldn't be diving into it full force. So I think it's talk about hospitality. I think it's my own hospitality, in a sense of just being like open to listen, being nice, being available to hear their story and to figure out what it is that's special about it, that we can then relay that message to other people.
So just really listening to them, hearing them, getting them comfortable, which I think is a great segue into like point of this whole podcast and this experiment that I'm working on. But like, how do you define hospitality in how you're operating your business, but then also to how you experience and both give and receive it?
Yeah, and I mean, I love that you came up with this idea of this podcast, because it's a great question. I don't think it's something, there's not one certain way you need to define what hospitality is. But for me, I feel it's a feeling. It's from a guest to a host, like whoever the guest is, or the customer, or the host to the customer, how you're making them feel. And I feel like it's when people understand hospitality or get it right, they make you feel so special and so welcome and so important, and that they're genuinely happy to see you, that they want you to feel good. And the people who are in the hospitality industry, or I would say get in it for the right reasons, get that. I think sometimes people might think they want to open a restaurant and they don't realize that it is all about hospitality and welcoming people and going that extra mile for them, so they feel so good they can't wait to come back.
Yeah. Also, in our initial conversations, it turns out we have a mutual friend in Glenn Coben.
Yes.
And that was really surprising well, not surprising, like he knows everybody and he's such an amazing guy. And he wrote this, so he did this really cool thing where he wrote this book called the Architects Cookbook, right? And
Right.
so he's talking about his design experience of the built environment, but for each restaurant, and then each cook or each chef that he would work with, they would do he would have a recipe from that, and also talk about the whole experience of designing and building and opening the restaurant and then the cooking. I'm sorry I didn't do research on this, but were any of those restaurants in his book your clients?
No. I had to think about it, but I am good friends with him through the industry. And I remember when he introduced the told me he was going to be working on this book, and I kind of was there for part of the process. And I think it was very cool. And I think one thing with Glenn that stands out is that he, all of his restaurants are so unique to themselves in their own style and voice, that he's able to capture. But I was like, I'm hoping I'm answering that right. But no, I don't think any of the restaurants in his book have been clients.
Okay.
But maybe for his next book, we'll work on that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I hope he is writing his next book, because I think what's really cool is if you think about from like a Venn diagram, right? So you have the design, then you actually have the culinary experience, and then the whole story. It's almost like between the chef, the design, and then you telling the story. It's like this perfect intersection of talking about that, as you were saying, like that feeling. Like you can drive straight at that feeling in a very focused way by combining all three of them.
Yes. I mean, design is super important. And I think his approach, from what I know, is I think it's similar to mine. He listens, he talks, he figures out what the restaurateur is looking for with the feel they want to get. And it takes a lot of listening to figure that out. But yes, design plays a huge role in the feel of a place for sure. And it's, I think, service, food, ambiance, it's all very important to make a complete hospitality wonderful experience for someone, in my opinion.
Totally. And I've heard you say the words listen and hear so many times just since we've started talking and then speaking previously. And if you think about learning from your clients and thinking about just in New York City and the restaurants and what everyone went through with all of the shutdowns and lockdowns and then the exciting movement outside to all this outdoor dining, which I really hope never goes away, because I think that is like a silver lining of the pandemic in New York City. In all the listenings, as you were going through what we all just went through, but especially in New York City restaurants, what did you listen to and hear from your clients, and what did you learn them? What was your like biggest learning through coming through this trough?
Wow. I mean, it's I've been in Manhattan. I've been in Manhattan since 1998, and I was here through the pandemic. I did not leave my Manhattan apartment. So it was, I mean, I think about it a lot, like what it was like, and it was daily changes for us as just people. And for the restaurants, it was like nonstop. Every day was like a new policy or change, or you can serve to-go cocktails. Now you can't. You can do outdoor dining. You can't. Indoor, outdoor. Like, it was constant. I mean, the resilience of restaurants. I mean, I've already known that they are just strong people, but they can get through anything. They're so it's. I mean, I'm always impressed with restaurateurs, but I think it upped my level of compassion and understanding of what restaurateurs need to go through to run their business. I had one client I've done work with over the years, Barbara Sibley of La Palapa, which is down in the East Village. She stayed open throughout the entire pandemic. She was feeding hospital workers. She's a dynamo. And she would say, she was quoted in an article once saying that it was like opening a new restaurant every single day. I mean, probably for the first couple months or something, or maybe the whole year. It's 2020, but wow. I mean, and I, as someone working, I got into this industry because I am passionate about restaurants and hospitality myself, and I have a love for restaurants in particular, but it just, as someone on the outside, I just wanted to help and do what I could to spread the word. I mean, I was grateful to have my podcast as a additional way to help spread the word of what was happening in the industry. But I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I feel
You
it's
are.
just an overall appreciation for restaurateurs and why they do what they do. They do it because they love it.
Mhm.
And they'll make it, they made it, you know, it's I mean, I hate to say it's not completely over yet, but we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I just have a lot of, I guess, empathy and compassion for what they do. And I'm grateful to know chefs and restaurateurs because they're really good giving people.
So as you were saying, what I heard you say is just resilience, right?
Mhm.
And I love that idea of as the world's changing on a minute by minute, hour by hour basis. I love how she said it's like we're starting a new restaurant every single day. And that really goes to resilience, because you could just pack it up and shut it all down. But no, we keep going, we keep going. I mean, I've had some pretty gnarly business experiences where I've had a coach just say, look, Dan, I know it's really hard, but it's all about resilience right now, right? You got to just breathe that word in and breathe that word out and just be resilient. And I think from a lot of your clients, and even just all restaurants everywhere, but especially in New York City, um, I mean, I've seen it, I've heard it, and I think we can all learn from it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough industry without a pandemic. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, it's hard. It's a hard business. The margins are tight. You're working, you know, 24/7. You're working when everyone has holiday breaks. You know, it's a hard industry. And that was the pandemic was certainly extremely challenging for the hospitality industry. And I just, yeah, give restaurateurs a lot of credit for also, a lot of, you know, the Independent Restaurant Coalition was formed, and ROAR, this organization in New York, where restaurateurs came together to help each other and to talk and to be a community, which that was something that was actually great, that was born out of the pandemic, where it was versus previously more having independent restaurants just making their own decisions and not communicating with each other about what they were doing to survive or thrive. They came together, and I feel that was a really nice thing, I guess, if I could say a silver lining of it.
Totally. And as you were saying, I had to look it up, but I used to live right around the corner from Prune, and Gabrielle, I forget her last name.
Hamilton.
Hamilton. At the beginning of the pandemic, she wrote this incredibly moving article in the New York Times,
Yeah.
just about like how New York has changed and this and that. And I guess how she's just like, I need to just move on and do something different. But I lived like right around the corner. They had the best food and everything there. But when you read that article, because I think that thing went viral, like
Yeah, I
beyond
read
New York. Like,
it.
how did
Probably
that
read it
make?
twice.
Yeah, I think I read it 3 times, and I totally forgot about it until you were speaking, because something just brought me right back there because it was so moving. Like, what were your feelings as you read that?
I mean, I wish I could go back right now and read it, but a bit heartbreaking, I think, if I that piece, because it was so honest. I mean, she's truly honest, raw writer. She's an excellent writer.
Totally.
People love her. I mean, I've had great meals at Prune. Prune's amazing. People like appreciate her food and her restaurant, but she's also become this voice in the industry where I mean, this wasn't the first piece she's written. And yeah, it was so honest. It was a bit heartbreaking in the sense of like how tough it was, but you kind of were, I guess, as an optimist, like thinking we're going to get through this, and this is just the reality now. But this is like, I mean, she laid it out, and I think so many people resonated with what she said because it was the truth. And appreciated it versus maybe putting what do you know, bells and whistles on something that's really not so fabulous. But
Yeah, but through all of it, there was this even though she was closing Prune, there was this undying passion
Mhm.
through the theme of the article as she was writing it. And then when you think about how hard it is to work and run in a New York City or any restaurant, but in New York City in particular, just like those kitchens are so small. And I had friends that when I first moved to New York City they were chefs and they were up and coming, and they're in it. I mean, it is not just all the passion and just the skill you need to actually make it, but it's also a feat of endurance.
Yeah, I mean, I've dined there a few times. It's a tight restaurant. It's intimate. And I think I've maybe seen a picture of the kitchen. The kitchen, I know it's small. I've worked with a lot of restaurants that are are tiny kitchens, and one, they make, I don't know. Sometimes when you sometimes go to these, and they're amazing restaurants for, let's say, Daniel Boulud or something, and they have these gorgeous kitchens, and it's like, oh, this is so fantastic. That is not a reality for everyone. And so a lot of times they're working in such hard conditions, between space, between the heat of the kitchen, between the urgency of things, between, it's something. When I worked in restaurants back in the day, I used to think, and I was a manager at one point, I used to think I was like I was a firefighter, was my analogy of like going into work and not knowing there would be a problem, something would come up, you didn't know what it was, and your job was to figure it out. But that's like the daily life of a restaurant. It's like, something's gonna happen and you don't know exactly what it is, but you got to be on your toes and ready to figure it out. And the
Yeah.
people who are really good at it make it look so easy that customers don't even notice any of this is happening.
100%. And then, as you're talking about Palapa and then Prune, and then I just remember living in the East Village in Alphabet City. There were so many great restaurants because I found the East Village in particular, it's kind of like this bump out, right? It's not really a thoroughfare. It's this place where you want to be, right? You're there for a reason. You're not passing through. Then we moved to Chelsea, and I found that all the restaurants, or not all, but most of the restaurants are these bigger, like they've kind of up and came and they're there. These more institutions, right? Which means higher rent, just more difficult leases. Whereas in the East Village, and again, I'm not an expert at all, I just found like the smaller footprint, those tighter kitchens allowed for more experimentation and more literal collisions. And so many restaurants came and went there, but by the time you would go to Chelsea or another higher rent part of town, you've already made it and you're there. But I loved the excitement and the passion of the turnover of all the cool cuisines from the East Village. Do you have an experience or feel or thought on that?
I agree 100%, because I live over by Columbus Circle on the Upper West Side, or lower Upper West Side, where there's a lot of pricier restaurants in my neighborhood, but it's more, when I go down to the East Village, it's all these like little local, probably, family run, mostly, gems, in a sense. Like you can walk down a couple blocks in the East Village and just, they're packed in like one block. You might have like 10 restaurants where you're like, oh, that looks, I want to go there. I want to go there. Like they're small, they're intimate, and they're doing something very, maybe it's just a one concept of something. Maybe they're only doing mac and cheese, or they're only doing ramen, or I don't know. They're very specific into what they're doing. But I definitely get that feeling. And I mean, both these restaurants we're talking about, La Palapa and Prune, were, well, Prune isn't really, well, it is East Village.
It is. It was
Yeah.
second or third between A and B, or B and C, somewhere over there.
Yeah, it is. And so I think that I agree with you, that neighborhood just, there's so many gems, I think. And I mean, restaurants come and go, and turnover it happens, but I feel there's a lot of places that have maintained or been around for a while down there, for whatever reason. Maybe the rent is also a little easier.
That's a lot of what it is. I have a question. As a restaurant expert, right? I'm more of a restaurant fan. You're an expert, but you're probably an expert and a super fan as well. Have you ever dined somewhere for the first time, had such an incredible experience that you had a fear to go back because it would ruin the initial experience?
I dine out a lot, and I also dine out a lot solo. Like solo dining is kind of my thing, and I just like checking out restaurants. I am a super fan. In fact, you're calling me an expert. I'm grateful. It's very nice. Trying to think. I mean, the one place I do think of, I was fortunate to go to Brooklyn Fair when it was only in Brooklyn, in the early stages of the restaurant, because I remember they did not have a beer, wine, or liquor license. It was BYOB at the time. And so that was very early on. And they didn't take reservations for one. I went with a friend, but I was blown away by the food. I remember it was like all these tiny, like 25 maybe little bites. I mean, they were small bites, but that was the tasting menu. And it was like 24 out of 25 I thought were absolutely incredible. And the other one was amazing, great too. So that's one place. They've since opened in Manhattan, and they have a new location. And I'm a little, my experience of that restaurant was so amazing. I'm a little afraid to go back and try it again, even though a part of me is like, this, I should, it's even a new location. But yeah, that stands out or the only one I can think of right off the top of my head.
No, the reason why I'm asking, I started thinking about this. Before I lived in New York City, I came here on a business trip, and I went to Gramercy Tavern, and I did the whole tasting menu with there were probably about 8 of us. And I don't know if the food was great. It's always solid. Well, this was 18 years ago. The food was really good. The wine, we did the pairing. It was amazing. But somehow the sommelier and the waiter, they made it into such a journey. And it was like one of the best dining experiences I ever had, that I never, ever, ever wanted to go back. And then in 2019, I went back. Again, another situation where just went with some friends, but I was fearful of going back. And then it just wasn't the same. I don't know if someone wasn't there. It really fell flat, and it almost ruined that first experience that I had. To whereas I also went to this other place, Le Bernardin, many, many years ago, and I'm scared to go back because, again, I think it was the sommelier. I think the sommelier at both of these places made it just this incredible journey where I could suspend all disbelief. They could tell me it's paired and you can taste hints of chocolate and nutmeg, and I just believe it. And they take me on this journey, but I have this fear of going back because in one case, the experience was not the same. And in this last one, I just don't want to mess with it. You've never had that?
Well, I think my Brooklyn Fair isn't like that.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Because it was the whole experience, it was so amazing. And I'm afraid if I go, maybe the food won't be as amazing or as to me, that was one of the top meals I've ever had. And I've dined out a lot. I mean, around the world, tasting menus. I mean, I travel a lot. I go to lots of restaurants. In my mind, though, it's still one of the best meals I've ever had. And I kind of don't want to ruin that. So
if you think about, I don't know, I'm trying to think of okay, so you have such an extensive list of clients. If you were to, is there a dream client that you've always wanted to have, but either have just never met, the opportunity never came around, but who would your ultimate dream client be from a restaurant perspective?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I mean,
Or is it we love all of our children equally?
I've been fortunate to work with so many wonderful people. And I know I started doing my podcast because I just know a lot of people in the industry, and I feel I'm fortunate that I know people, let's say like Danny Meyer was my guest. Me, will always be so special. And the fact that I know Danny and I have a relationship with him, and it's to me that makes me feel great. Would I then say, oh, well, it would be amazing to work on one of Danny's restaurants? Sure, I would think, yeah, I could say that. But then also this kind of ties into like not to ruin a special experience or a restaurant. Like, well, maybe that would change if I worked with Danny. And what if it wasn't as great doing his PR, or it didn't go as well, or whatever, I mean, so I don't know if I have an exact dream client. I feel lucky that I'm at the point with my business where most of my clients come from referrals, and that people know I've been doing this for a long time, and that I'm in it. I'm still like a one-woman show basically with my company, where I do the work and I have the relationship with the clients and the media. And so I'm not really answering your question, but I guess maybe I'm saying Danny Meyer, but
No,
I'm
actually,
fearful of it.
you answered it. You actually answered it perfectly, because actually, if I think of like the ultimate guest, if I think of the ultimate guest that I would want on this show, it would be Danny Meyer, because I have read his books. He was actually, and despite the Gramercy Tavern story, I think it was just an off night, but there was also that first experience was just the greatest experience. And then I like listening to Setting the Table with my kids on a road trip to, I don't know, we were going up to Lake Placid. We listened to his whole book there and back, and they were like, wow, that's really awesome. I want to have a restaurant. And he was actually the last person I saw from the industry before everything shut down. I guess it was March 2020, March or late February or early March 2020. I was at this hospitality design summit in, where was that? Cancun, I think. And he was like the keynote speaker. And then I went up after with a book. I guess I asked a question, I got handed a book, and then I went up, I said, oh my God, you're my hero. I've eaten next to you at your restaurants for breakfast, and you're always there having a great. He's like, oh, why didn't you come say hello? I was like, you look like you were in a important conversation. He's like, no, like anytime you see me in a restaurant, come up and say hello. I was like, okay. So I haven't seen him because the world shut down, but he signed the book and he was just awesome. And I love how he recruits and hires people with his idea of this hospitality quotient, right? And that measurable, and it's really the filter and value by which he looks at everything. And I get it that you're friends with him. And I think that I totally understand why you wouldn't want to work with him, because that might change the dynamic of your friendship.
Yes. And I wouldn't say I'm not like, I mean, we're friendly. Yeah, he's an industry friend, but I'm not like best buddies with Danny. But I have gotten to know him over the years a little bit, and I've always had an appreciation for him and his restaurants and as what he stands for. And I think one thing he's known for saying, and I'm kind of improvising, but that like you can't teach someone to be like a nice person, but you can teach them skills. You can teach them, how to fold a napkin or something, So when he's hiring, it's more like looking at personality for his team. And that has always resonated with me, because you can't teach someone to be hospitable, or maybe you can, but to be nice.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or like within.
To me, it's almost like if you're hiring for culture rather than skills, right? Because people are wired certain ways, right? And you can try as you may to change people. You can teach them skills, but if you're hiring for culture, and if hospitality is like number one, you hire for that, for the interpersonal skills. If you're hiring a nuclear physicist, you're going to be hiring them for other reasons, right?
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Hmm.
And if Danny called me up this afternoon and said, I have a new project, I would like to interview you, talk about it. Are you interested? I mean, that's like a no brainer. Of course, I'm like, yes,
Oh, good.
let's go. So, but yeah,
Fair
it's,
enough.
yeah.
Yeah. So as you think about like where you are, where the industry is, where it's going, what's exciting you most about the future?
Well, I mean, I love restaurants, and I feel that for what everyone has been through in the past couple of years, that we are like very optimistic for the future and just getting back to, I mean, what people are saying normal or the new normal, or just bringing people together and just, I feel we've been through so much that it should be, I guess, in a sense, easier. I don't to, but hardship kind of, it brings out your, as you said, your resilience, and I think also your creativity. I mean, a lot of creativity was born through the pandemic, or people really figured things out or thought of things out of the box differently. I think what I'm most excited about in the future is people to be more willing to take risks in a sense that maybe they weren't as comfortable with before, that maybe the pandemic kind of helped them get over a fear of like, let's just go for this and be creative. I was working with a chef, Eric Bruner Yang, in Washington, D.C. before the pandemic. He had a couple of restaurants at the Line Hotel. And one of them was spoken English, and it was a standing only restaurant, which when he opened, it got some, critique. And even while it was open, people were a little skeptical of it. Once they went and experienced it, they thought it was amazing, and you kind of didn't even notice you were standing. But that was a risk for him to take, like, a standing only restaurant. It was very intimate. So I think we might see more of that in the future, of people just thinking out of the box and going for it. And that excites me.
Yeah. So I love how you were saying this idea of being creative and taking risks and creativity. And a standing only restaurant is a great example of that. As I look at Manhattan or New York City over the past 10 years, I think one of the riskiest things that I've seen was just the addition of all the bike lanes and city bikes, right? It changed the city overnight. It was a surprise. No one saw it coming. And then also, and I think this was a risk, but a risk to try and help restaurateurs, was the push to outdoor dining. Yes. And if I think about bike lanes and city bikes and then outdoor dining, it's changed the look and feel of Manhattan and Brooklyn in particular. Do you see outdoor dining staying? Like, what are your feelings on that? Like, what are you hearing? I hope it stays.
Well, I'm hearing I think the city is trying to figure it out. I mean, there's people, I think, on both sides of the fence. Some people who love the outdoor dining and all the setups, and then some people, neighborhoods, or people that it's maybe disrupted their neighborhood to them a bit, and they're not as happy about it. And as someone who was here during the pandemic, I took to city biking a lot. It's now become, well, if the weather's warm enough, it's now my favorite way to get around the city. And it was great, especially in 2020, when I wasn't getting on the subway, to get on a city bike and to see Manhattan and to bike around and see what was happening with restaurants and who was open, who wasn't open, who built an outdoor patio, who didn't, and the changes. So I'm a big fan myself of city bikes, and the bike lanes keep getting better. Keep getting better, which I like too. I think it's a little, but on the flip side, it is a bit dangerous, because some of the restaurants that have outdoor kiosks built there's literally a bike lane going between the sidewalk and their outdoor structure, and they have like slow down signs, but literally bicycles are going, I guess you'd say, through the middle of the restaurant, you could say. So I think that's dangerous. So far it's worked. I'm hoping, or I think there will be, I don't think the outdoor structures is going to go away. I think there might be some rules about it, or some permits, or what, that people need to get. But I think it's been extremely helpful for restaurants in surviving and thriving, and some of them even when they were able to build large outdoor decks and like double their capacity. So I think it's a good thing. I'm pro restaurants. I want them to succeed, but yeah, it's a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, and I was also amazed at how, Byzantine New York City's building code is, and really like overnight with very little code, just all these structures started popping up, and it really was it was a lifeline to restaurants. I mean, it was amazing that it actually happened, and it was exciting. I think we can just learn a lot from that as well.
Yes. And then between 2020 summer and 2021, I would bike around and see the improvements and the more investments in these structures. They got, some of them got very fancy. But you're right, like just that they were able to put these things together very fast.
Totally. So staying with the risk and creativity theme here, because I really like where this is going. A lot of people started pushing me to do this podcast. I was like, I don't want to do a podcast. Who wants to listen to me or my guests? But I realized no one wants to listen to me. Everyone wants to listen to my amazing guests like you. So when you were deciding to do your podcast all in the industry, like how big of a risk was that for you? How do you feel creatively fulfilled doing it now?
Once again, thank you. I feel we're probably similar in a sense of, the reasons we started doing a podcast, just something to be passionate. I was passionate about it. I hit the 10-year mark with having my PR business, and I was sort of thinking, like, now what? And that was kind of where I knew a couple people have podcasts. I mean, I started in 2014, so it wasn't as filled market, I guess you'd say. A lot of people have podcasts now. But I just came up with an idea. I had zero experience. I'd never even been on a podcast. I'd never been on a show. But it was an idea behind the scenes, to cover behind the scenes in hospitality, people I knew in the industry that did something with restaurants in the hospitality space that was different than what I did. But they weren't necessarily clients of mine. They weren't necessarily media, which I know a lot of as a PR person. They were just people I knew. They did the cocktail programs. They did design the restaurants. They were chefs themselves. So it was the idea I came up with, and I guess I'm a risk taker. I certainly am. I like to challenge myself. I like to try new things. I like to go for it, and I did. And it's also my show with the pandemic. It's not live, but for the first, before it was Wednesdays, 4:00 live from Heritage Radio Network in the backyard of Roberta's restaurant, which, outside, we were in a shipping container with a restaurant happening on the other side of the window that could see us and we could see them. And so there was something, it was nerve-wracking, especially being on a live show. Now I still do my show like it's live. We really don't edit much at all. I mean, barely over all these years I've edited, but I guess it's exciting for me. I like, as you said, talking to guests, like I like hearing people's story and having a platform that I can share that with other people. And my guests are coming on the show and talking about what they know best, themselves and their careers. So usually my guests are amazing. They're so articulate. They're so that I just am kind of like leading the ship, and it's, and I'm not a huge talker on my show. I like the guests to talk way more than me. So,
Yeah.
but I think it's still a risk in a sense that I'm doing it, that I'm still putting myself out there and talking to people, and you don't know what, it's, as I said, we do it like it's live. So you don't know, I can prep for the show, but I still don't know what someone's going to say, how the conversation is going to go exactly. So it's a bit risky, but I guess I like that. I guess I find it exciting.
Yeah. Thinking, going on a risk taking, and if you look at your 25 years plus career, as you said, if you were to go back and look at the mentors that you had, because I believe we all stand on the shoulders of those before us, which one of your mentors really helped you learn to take risks and be okay with taking risks?
It's interesting because I don't know if I'm one of those people that has like exact people I think of my specific mentors, but for some reason his name is, he's just popping into my head now. I was a server at Charlie Trotter's back in 1997. And actually before that, I got that job. I went to cooking school in Chicago. I thought I wanted to be a chef. And then I saw Charlie Trotter was hiring front of the house staff. I had more front of the house experience than back. And I went in, I got hired, and I was there about a year working for him. And he was so ahead of his time, and he was such a risk taker. And I mean, he was intense. It was an intense job. It was a very hard job, because talk about, I mean, hospitality, people are going into this restaurant on mostly special occasions, looking for this extraordinary experience. And as someone who's the server there, there's a lot of pressure on you. But I'm very grateful to have had that experience and to have gotten to know him and work with him. And I feel there's something about he definitely was ahead of his time and taking risks. And so maybe that has inspired me a bit.
Okay, so that's super interesting because, okay, he's amazing. He's a legend, right? You're working there in 1997. As you said, it's intense, right? Everything is intense. Just getting as a server, it's so hard. And then if you go back to how you defined hospitality, it was like about that feeling. So in that intensity and stressful environment, how did he make you feel at ease?
I don't know if he did. No, he was nice. He never, I like Charlie. I think he was intense. He was a perfectionist. And I think as someone, I mean, I don't like the word perfectionist at all, but I am definitely someone who aims for perfection. And I think that type of person that worked there, and I feel it, it fit me, or I was good at it, but I felt, I mean, I think there's just making sure your staff and I felt taken care of, or part of the team, just the little extra, feedback or compliments on something you did at the end of service. But I don't think it wasn't like the most like warm and fuzzy, I'd say, place. It was serious. It was a serious dining experience.
So that's amazing, because if you think about, okay, this warm and fuzzy feeling and idea of hospitality, right? And making others feel at ease and welcome. And maybe it's the guests, right? Because you're serving them. But then I've talked to other people in this podcast and throughout my career that just are the types with this uncompromising vision, right? And they can be almost tyrannical about it, but they are painting such a precise picture of that experience that it's like, whenever I'm around people like that, I also feel challenged to like get over the bar and like to please, right? Yeah. So is it more like that type of an experience?
Yeah, I think that resonates with me for sure. Like, yeah, it was challenging. There was a lot of pressure, but it was also exciting. He had a table in his kitchen, the chef's table that was literally in like right at the pass. And sometimes I would be assigned to be the server at that table, and they got their own special menu with all these amuse at the beginning. And it was like, it was very special. But it was hard. Like then you're in the kitchen, and Charlie or the chefs, they can hear, your dialogue with the table. And but I think just wanting to, for myself, bring and have the guests have that extraordinary experience, and I was a part of it. Something about being a part of it, this, like, that what he was doing, and that being on the team, being the person responsible for that kitchen table. I mean, it made me feel special, or it made me feel like, okay, he trusts me to do this. And that there was something in that for sure that motivated me.
Thank you for sharing. And then, okay, so again, going back to you, the storyteller, right? You, the storyteller. What story do you want to write for yourself over the next year?
See, this one, I'm not a planner. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing a week from now, a year from now. I am a doer though. So I'll definitely be doing something, and probably something new and challenging. I mean, just touching it briefly, like I did a conference in January 2020 that was, again, an idea that I came up with. And I literally did a conference called HOST, which stands for Hospitality Operations Services and Technology. And it was based on my podcast, but like being behind the scenes in hospitality, but bringing everyone together in a live format with panel discussions. And I've always been someone who's a networker and likes bringing people together. So I'm glad I have photos and videos of this, because it was a full day event and it was very successful. And people ask me when I'm bringing it back, and I haven't decided yet, because if you're thinking of making this show into this podcast into a conference, let me just tell you right now, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it was so well received that I probably will bring it back on some level.
Where was it?
It was at the William Vale in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg.
Okay.
And it was in their conference room downstairs, but it started with, we had a breakfast, lunch, we had a curated lunch session, we had cocktail hour. I mean, it was a full blown thing. And it was, I mean, the feedback was really great, made me feel good. So I don't know, maybe I bring that back. I mean, I created All in the Industry as a company separate from Bayer Public Relations. I don't know, but I mean, to answer your question, it's like, we'll see. I'm definitely someone who likes challenging myself, and I'm a worker. I like work. I've always liked work. So you're gonna have to stay tuned.
Well, as you shared that idea of building community, doing these conversations it's a very different way of communicating, right? You're doing this long format communication. If you have dinner with someone or lunch, you're getting interrupted. Would you like sparkling or still? Would you like a bottle of wine? What are you going to order? This is like a very different and very open way of communicating that just goes on, right? And I think about all the guests that I've had, and I'm sure it's similar with you. It's like, you guys all have these, you and I have these shared passions with the people that we're talking to, right? And as you were saying that conferencing, I wasn't thinking of doing a conference, but there's this thing that's scratching at me of like, hey, how do I build a community out of this? Maybe a conference is one option. I don't know. Maybe just other shared interpersonal experiences, something experiential. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about that offline, because I just feel like there is so much more. And I think so much is missed, and we're all craving these collisions with each other. And that sounds awesome. I didn't know that you did that, and that's bad on me.
Oh, no, it's all good. I
But
mean,
that's
I
inspiring.
wear a lot of hats. I also, I write a little bit on the side too about solo dining and travel, just because it's something I do a lot. But yeah, I've always been I'm all in the industry, literally. And the conference was, you can look it up.
Oh, I'm going to.
Glenn was, I curated the program, and one of the sessions was Glenn Coben and Jimmy Huey. Do you know Jimmy?
No.
Jimmy designs kitchens, and the two of them have worked together on projects. And so their panel was just the two of them in a one-on-one conversation, talking to each other about design with restaurants. So that was, yeah, it was very special. I got lucky that it was the end of January 2020, and then it was literally, the world shut down like 6 weeks later. So it would be interesting also to do another conference, and the conversations will be different now. I think back, like,
Totally.
just we didn't know what was coming when we were having those conversations.
And then let's just pretend you were going to do the conference again tomorrow. Everything was set up and you're going. What would you do differently tomorrow than you did in January 2020?
I don't know. I think I liked, it was, the only thing I'm thinking is maybe it doesn't have to be as elaborate. We had a lot of components from breakfast to cocktail hour. It could be the same, but I think, as you said, like, it's about, there's something about bringing people together. And that's really my motivation for it, is like connecting people and bringing us together. And I don't think you need all of the hoopla, in a sense, not like it was like so hoopla-y, but you know what I mean? Like, I think it could be more, maybe not as complex, or just like maybe a half-day conference, or it doesn't have to be as fancy of a venue. It was lovely, but I don't know if I think right now, especially, people just want to connect, and people miss that in-person connection. So with in the past 2 years, I didn't have the desire to make it into an online conference. Also, it wasn't my one business that I had to do that. So I just have put it on hold. But I think if I brought it back, it's just about bringing people together.
I love it. And that's so inspirational. And I never even thought about that. So thank you for sharing. And we will talk about more about that offline. So if you go back to your server self working at Charlie Trotter's in what, 1997?
Yeah, good memory.
What advice does the Shari of today give your former self?
I think I've learned, it's like, be kind to yourself. Like, sometimes I'm that more people-pleasing type personality. And sometimes especially people in the hospitality industry, I think you're so giving that you're more concerned sometimes with other people than you are with yourself. And I think, it's definitely not, this is cliche, I guess, but people say, you got to take care of yourself before you could take care of anyone else. I think it's very true. I think sometimes, restaurant life, especially back then, the hours, during that period, I didn't do anything besides go to work. I was and sleep. It was that was it. So I think taking time for yourself, figuring out some work-life balance, and making sure, that you're in tune with what your own needs are. I think that's really important. I think the industry's changed a bit, that over the, since then, that people are thinking about that and kitchens and restaurants are run a bit differently, but I think, I think just making sure you're taking care of yourself, you're providing hospitality for yourself, I think is important.
It's really important. I think about like what I do, and I furnish hotels. And what I love about it the most is I get to make sure others are having the best possible journey towards opening their hotel. Like that's what lights me up. But what lights me up even more than that is when I can shorten other people's journeys through introduction. Just, hey, I have this idea, or that someone wants to learn this, and I can just kind of connect the dots a little bit faster. And it's interesting you say that, because I just think about, hey, how do I shorten my own journey? I'm always so concerned with others that sometimes it is good to take a look at ourselves. And maybe for those of us in this industry, it's hard for us to think about ourselves in that way.
Well, I think people who get into this and do what we do, there's something about our careers and our personality is why I do PR. You want to help other people. So, but yeah, I think it is important for all of us to reflect on that and sort of make sure that we're taking care of our own needs. And yeah, I just wanted to mention there was another job I had in Chicago before Trotters, where I was an office manager at a microbrewery called Rock Bottom. And that job, that was when I really, they had a saying that I don't hear much, but it was called lagniappe. And it basically meant like going that extra mile for someone, like I wasn't a server there, but that was their whole philosophy. And I always think about that when I was thinking about the show and hospitality. It's like going beyond someone's expectations. And I learned that from this microbrewery.
Well, I've learned a lot in microbreweries.
There you go. There you go. Appreciate a good beer.
Yeah. Mostly how I don't like wheat beers, but I prefer an IPA or a Pilsner.
But that, yeah, I don't know, my restaurant experience, I think it definitely plays into what I do today. I mean, that's knowing what it's like to wait tables or be a manager or a server and even cook in a kitchen. I think that helps me today to understand what it takes to run a restaurant, and also the empathy sort of notion that
Yeah.
it's hard. It's a very hard industry.
Well, it is a hard industry, but Shari, I will say it again, it's inspiring to just see the community that you've built and the followers that you have. And I think we all have so much to teach each other. If going back to how you first started talking, but we all just got to listen. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your insights on hospitality and just your life experience as well. And I can't wait to learn more about community building from you. How can people connect with you?
Well, they can find me on social media. I have a bunch of accounts. I've got at Shari Bayer, at Bayer PR, and at All Industry. I also have the same websites, sharibayer.com, bayerpublicrelations.com, and allintheindustry.com. And probably the best email for me is shari@bayerpublicrelations.com.
Wonderful.
That's the OG.
Good. The OG. We love it. So we'll put all that in the liner notes as well if you're driving and listening. But Shari, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate you having me on your show. It's fantastic. I've listened to a bunch of them, and I'm going to listen to some more. And I say, keep doing what you're doing. And I hope to meet you in person one of these days.
Yes, we will meet in person soon, I promise. And also, I just want to thank our listeners. I'm hoping that this has evolved your thinking on hospitality, both giving and receiving, and really just listening and hearing others and making others feel at ease. And if it did, please share it. Share this podcast with a friend. And everyone, thank you so much. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.